Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this rendition of the Inclusion Talk series for April as we honor Arab American Heritage Month with our amazing speaker, Linda Sarsour. Linda Sarsour is an award-winning racial justice and civil rights activist, seasoned community organizer, direct action strategist, and mother of three. Ambitious, outspoken, and independent, Linda shatters stereotypes of Muslim women while also treasuring her religious and ethnic heritage. She is a Palestinian Muslim American and self-proclaimed pure New Yorker, born and raised in Brooklyn. She is the co-founder of the first Muslim online organizing platform, Empower Change, and co-founder of Until Freedom, an intersectional racial justice organization focused on direct action and power building in communities of color. Until Freedom is best known for their work on the Breonna Taylor police murder case that happened in Louisville, Kentucky. She was one of the national co-chairs of the largest single-day protest in U.S. history, the Women's March on Washington. She has been named amongst 500 of the most influential Muslims in the world and has been recognized as one of Fortune's 50 greatest leaders and featured as one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in the world. Linda was the youngest woman and first Muslim to receive the Margaret Brent Medal at St. Mary's College, has been honored by dozens of local and national entities, including the New York Women's Foundation, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, the New York City Council, President Barack Obama, Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, the Black Institute, NAACP New York Conference, and so many more. She received the 2023 Daughter of Greatness Award from the Muhammad Ali Center and the 2023 Heman and Sweat Award from the National Bar Association. Linda is the author of We Are Not Here to Be Bystanders, a memoir of love and resistance, published by Simon & Schuster, and is most recognized for her transformative intersectional organizing work and movement building. I am so honored and pleased to welcome and introduce to some and reintroduce to others our speaker for today, Linda Sarsour. Linda, the floor is yours.
It's never going to fail. I hate hearing all those things about me. It's almost like I'm listening to somebody about somebody else, but I appreciate that introduction, Rhett, and thank you to Compass Family Services. I wish you could see my Zoom setup. I'm actually at a friend's house doing a Zoom because I wanted to be close to an event that I'm going to afterwards. Today's the second day of Passover, and there's a Seder that's happening actually about a few minutes from here. So I wanted to be close so I can just kind of slip out. And Sarah has this humongous Apple computer. It's like a big flat screen TV. And so you all look very big and beautiful and gorgeous and diverse. And I'm so happy that I'm able to be here with all of you today. And I told this to Rhett earlier that not a lot of people are celebrating my kind these days. And so for Compass Family Services to take this opportunity to engage on Arab American Heritage Month is absolutely stunning and inspirational. There are many nonprofit organizations around the country, and not all of them are celebrating Arab American Heritage MENA Month, which also stands for Middle East North Africa. So I just feel really humbled and really honored to be here with all of you today. I learned a lot from Rhett about Compass Family Services, and what made me feel so aligned is that I started like many of you. I have been an organizer and providing direct service to marginalized people for the last 23 years. I started out in a social service organization in Southwest Brooklyn, supporting immigrant families who are experiencing evictions, experiencing houselessness, experiencing obstacles and struggles, just navigating the complicated, unnecessarily complicated systems of this country that we live in. And so I greatly, deeply appreciate everything that you do. And I know this work is not easy. And I want to say, as someone who does very similar work that you do, that there are people who count on you every day. And I know this work is hard and it's frustrating. And sometimes you're like, what the hell's going on here? Why am I even here? There are many reasons why you are there. You were chosen to do this work, many of you because you decided this is what you want to commit yourself to, and others from experience. You have experienced this and decided to take your experience to ensure that others do not have to struggle the same way that you did. You learn things, as they say, the hard way, and you don't want people to experience the things the hard way in the ways that you experience them. So I just want to start by saluting all of you for choosing this work. To be honest with you, you all could probably be doing a whole lot of other things. You could be working in a whole lot of other places and a lot simpler types of sectors, but you decided this is the hard work, and we need people like you every day. And I'm grateful that the people of San Francisco who need you are able to find you and know that Compass Family Services is doing the good work out there. I wanted to share with you a bit about my story, because I think oftentimes when we hear about Arab Americans, or we even think of Arab Americans, you already know people live amongst a lot of stereotypes. They've been exposed to a lot of stereotypes. And I just want to be very clear that not all Arab Americans look like me. Arab Americans are from across the Middle East, North Africa. We are anywhere from blonde with blue eyes to people who share African features because they are from the African continent, like folks from Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, and Egypt. The Arab American people are also of every faith background and of no faith background. So oftentimes when people think Arab, they think of me. They think of women and hijab, and immediately we assume that every Arab is a Muslim and every Muslim is an Arab. And I hope that what you do get out of today is that we are a vibrant, beautiful, diverse community of all political backgrounds, of all religious backgrounds, and none. We also live in all across this country. We are anywhere from the big metropolitan cities like New York City, Los Angeles, and yes, San Francisco. But we are also in the Appalachias. We are in rural America. Some of our community members are farm workers, and some of them are undocumented. Some folks are Black Muslims who are indigenous and have been on the shores of these lands, some before this was called the United States of America. We are also indigenous in the sense of Native American Muslims, meaning from the Muslim part, of course, but Black Muslims like Sudanese. A lot of people think Sudanese Americans, people will classify them as Black, but many of them are classified as Black and Arab and also speak the Arabic language. And so I just want to open your horizons that we are all kinds of people. And we hail from many parts of the world, and many of us are in diaspora as we are here in the United States of America. My story is something that I think will illustrate how I got here, because I think all of you have a story of why you're doing the work that you do. I don't think people happenstance end up in the nonprofit, or happenstance end up being public servants or serving the general public. That's just not how life works. Oftentimes when we're growing up, we have a lot of aspirations. We want to be doctors and lawyers and engineers. We want to be teachers. We want to be artists. We want to be all kinds of things. And then things happen in our lives that get us into the places that we are right now. And my story is that I was a college student many years ago, about 23 years ago, and I was an aspiring high school English teacher. I'm going to date myself just a little bit because I see some of you are in my age range. I watched a movie called Dangerous Minds with Michelle Pfeiffer. And it was a movie about a public school teacher who was teaching in an inner city school, and most of the young people were poor and working class, Black and brown, just the kinds of kids that this country often kind of puts to the side and says, these kids are not going to be anything anyway, let's not waste our time on them. And so this movie is about this teacher who says, absolutely not. I'm going to invest. When the kids don't show up to school, I'm going to roll up to their house, and I'm going to make sure that these kids know that if no one else loves them, I do, and I believe in them. And that movie really inspired me, because I went to an all-Black high school in New York called John Jay High School, and I watched the ways in which young people in my school were treated, and the criminalization of young people in New York City, even before NYPD was a thing in our schools. I don't know if you all know, but in New York City, our school safety offices are NYPD. But back in the days, we used to have regular security officers, except in some schools like mine where NYPD was there. I remember many times where young people would fight and do things that young teenagers do, and I would watch police officers literally beat young people to the ground, arrest them, and take them away. And I knew something about that was not right. It just did not sit right with me. So I vowed to grow up and be a high school English teacher and teach young people about literature and storytelling. And that was my whole big dream. You know, I'm going to have summers off. I got to be off of work at 4 o'clock. I mean, the whole thing was planned out. And then one day, while I was a college student, a horrific attack happened to this nation, happened to my city, and it changed my life, the life of my family, and probably your lives as well. I was a college student, and when the horrific attacks of 9/11 happened, as you probably, some of you remember, some of you are young, but some of you remember, we did not have, my friend, social media at the time. There was no way to figure out what was happening around you. I felt like I was in doomsday. I felt like I didn't understand what was going on. And I went to a university that was across from Manhattan. And I literally walked out on my college campus and held my hand out because I was literally catching burned pieces of paper falling from the sky. I literally thought it was the end of the world. And as I was asking people around me what was happening, nobody knew what happened. The security officer at my school said, all I know is that an airplane hit a building. That's all I know. And so imagine that day walking home for 3 hours because there was no public transportation in New York City at the time. And by the time I got to the community that I'm from, I looked around and I couldn't believe that this bustling community that I was from, an immigrant business district, Fifth Avenue in Southwest Brooklyn, the businesses were closed. And it was just an ominous feeling. I was like, what's going on here? Why are the businesses closed? What happened here? As I continued to walk, I walked past my mosque, which is my religious institution, and I literally saw the gate of my mosque down. Just to be clear, I didn't even know my mosque had a gate because my mosque never closed the gate. My mosque was open 24 hours a day for anyone in need. People sometimes slept at the mosque. I was like, why is the gate down? Where did this gate come from? And I continued to walk until I got to my mother's house because my mom was watching my children. And I want to share because a lot of people sometimes bring speakers and think that we're some extraordinary people or have something more to offer than all of you. But there's nothing extraordinary about me. In fact, when I was 20 years old, I already had 2 children. And my mother was watching my 2 children while I was trying to complete my studies. And so as I walked to my mother's house that day, who was watching my 2 children at the time, my mother, who also wears hijab like me, which is this scarf that I'm wearing, ran out of the house without her hijab. And I was like, where are you going, my friend? You forgot to wear your hijab. And my mom said, you can't wear it right now. And I was like, and at that time, I still didn't really clearly understand what had happened until I walked into my mother's house, sat in front of the TV, and all I saw, as many of you saw, is the chiron at the bottom of the TV that basically said, Islam, Muslim terrorist, Muslim, Islamic, Muslims hate us. We're being attacked by the Muslims. And it all kind of soaked in. At that point, I went from feeling like a very proud New Yorker, and I still am, to feeling unsafe in the very city that I was born and raised in. The ways in which our country shifted immediately from seeing us as their neighbors to seeing us as part of a suspect class was absolutely stunning on so many levels. Like, I couldn't believe how fast it happened. That Friday, right after the horrific attacks of 9/11, I was at the mosque and women came to the mosque, immigrant women who came basically to say that some people came to their homes and kidnapped their husbands, fathers, and sons. And I thought to myself, as a born and raised Brooklynite, what do you mean people just come to your house and kidnap your family members? Like, this is just, it must be hyperbole. This is crazy. And in fact, it was true. And what I mean by the United States government was kidnapping people from their homes is that when you come to someone's home, you detain someone, take them away, and you don't tell people where you're taking them, that might be called kidnapping. And so from there, I became a translator. And I know many of you, as part of your work, are able to translate between clients and the services that they require. And my job was, as a volunteer, was to connect these women to legal services and to help locate their family members in the abyss of law enforcement and detention. And as I visited detention centers in the Northeast, in Manhattan, in New Jersey, in Pennsylvania, I couldn't believe the conditions that our immigration detention centers were in. I could not believe that they would hold human beings in these types of facilities. And so, as many of you have probably been radicalized by the experiences you have had, I was radicalized. I was enraged and I was outraged by the way in which the United States government decided that Arab Americans and Arab immigrants and Muslim immigrants somehow were the enemy within. And so our community became a target of many policies, including unwarranted surveillance, mass detention and deportation, even entire programs that were started after the horrific attacks of 9/11. There was a special program called, you won't believe this one, it was called the Special Call-in Registration System, otherwise known as NSEERS, that literally said, if you are male over the age of 16 and you are from one of these countries of origin and you are not a US citizen, you are required to come register with the United States government. And I could have went back and continued my studies to be a high school English teacher. But as someone who came from a community that I loved and a community that I believed deserved better and deserved to be treated with human rights and dignity, and believed they had absolutely nothing to do with the horrific attacks that had befell our nation on that day, I was like, I'm not going back from here. If I'm not going to fight for my people, I don't know who's going to fight for my people. So I stayed, and here I am 23 years later, still organizing and still building and still defending the rights of Muslim Americans and immigrants and refugees in this country. But one thing that I want to share with all of you is that in my journey as an Arab American and trying to find my role, I'm one of those people that's from a community that's like an in-between, right? Like a lot of Arab Americans, or particularly Arab American women who don't wear hijab and are fair skinned like me, we could roll, like we could get in, we're white passing, and we can probably experience and be able to benefit from much of privilege that is available in this country for folks who are white passing. This hijab disqualifies me, unfortunately, of that. And it's one of the reasons why I wear it with pride, because I want to make sure that every experience that I have is based on my credentials, based on my dignity as a human being, and not just because someone thinks that I'm a white person and deserve privileges just for the sake of the race that people perceive that I am. But what I will say is that what I learned in my journey in this organizing for the last 23 years is that there's no one community that's going to be able to get full rights in this country if we're not organizing across our communities and organizing together. This idea that if one group of people has rights and we want to work on this group next and this group next, it's not going to work. We have to be intersectional. And I know that at Compass Family Services, you all have this wraparound service model. And part of that is the way that you think about people in an intersectional way. It's not just about getting them a home or getting them a house or getting them an apartment. It's about making sure they have that you're looking at them as a whole person. I learned this from reading incredible writers like Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde said, we cannot have single issue struggles because we don't live single issue lives. Oftentimes you are working with people who have different immigration statuses. They are different socioeconomic levels. Some of them have education. Some of them do not have education. Some of them speak English. Some of them don't speak English at all. Some of them speak a language that's not familiar or not mainstream besides Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, Russian, and other types of languages that may be a bit more common to find translation. Lots of people that we're organizing are people also not from this country, so they're not familiar with the ways in which the systems of these United States work. And so as you look at someone and look at them as a whole person, their racial identity, their gender identity, these are things that matter in the ways in which you serve people. It also matters how we organize. So if we are not connecting racial justice to gender justice, right? If we're not connecting this to the conditions of the way people live within their communities and all types of issues that impact people, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. You can't just provide somebody housing. Do they have a job? Do they have mental health services? Do they have daycare? This idea that you're looking at people in a holistic way is exactly the way in which I encourage our movements to move forward. You know, for me, as a daughter of immigrants, I also teach people a lot about meeting people where they're at. Oftentimes when we're organizing people or working with clients, we expect people in this country, we have a lot of high expectations of people. We expect people to show up ideologically pure. You want them to know everything. You want the immigrant women to start pronouns and understand all the like liberal kind of intellectualism and start people have to be, we have to meet people where they're at. We have to understand that people are in different places in life and that we are stewards of bringing people to the place that we want them to go. being able to have deep conversations with people, trying to understand where people come from, what are their fears, but also what are their aspirations and their hopes. And for me, that has been a great learning experience, even as a Muslim American growing up in the United States of America and organizing with a heavily immigrant Muslim community. Trust me, my friends, the challenges are great. And sometimes I want to run the other way, but I also believe in the potential of people. I believe in the potential of people to be allies and to be in the work and for us to organize together. You know, I wrote a book that Rhett talked about called "We Are Not Here to Be Bystanders." And I believe that. And I believe that you all have already embodied what it means that to be and to show up in this model of we are not here to be bystanders. And what I mean by that and what my book is about is it's a memoir, but also a manifesto that says that we are not just here to watch other people suffer. And we are not here to take on the characteristics of a nation that has taught us individualism. And I don't take this country for granted, just to be clear. My immigrant parents chose to come to this country. But I also tell people all the time that I came from a culture, and many of you have the same, whether you come from Black culture or other immigrant cultures. We grew up in a community that's a village. We grew up with the auntie and grandma and auntie down the street, and this idea of where we take care of one another. You know, if your mom was out late working, your mom knew who to call in the community to say, I'm not going to be home for another 2 hours. Just keep your eyes on my door, make sure that my kids are not outside, all of that. This is the kind of community that I grew up in. And then I realized that in this country, we are taught every man, woman, person for themselves. Pick yourself up by the bootstraps. Why are you houseless? Go find a house. Why are you lazy? Why don't you have a job? And that if you have health care and you have a house, why are you worrying about people that don't have health care and that don't have a house? You're good. This idea of that we should all just take care of ourselves. Make sure your people are good. Don't worry about everybody else. And my philosophy is rejecting that at every turn. I reject that. I reject that. I reject that. Just because I'm good, it does not mean that I'm going to ignore suffering and harm that is happening around me. Yes, I have health care. Yes, I have a job. Yes, my kids have college degrees. And yes, I have so many privileges. And in fact, that makes me want to even double down more on working in a movement to ensure that other people have the same opportunities that were afforded to me. And so when I think about what you're doing, you are not being a bystander. You get up every day in your own role and are saying that I am going to be a ally to somebody, even though for you the relationship might be case manager to client, you know, outreach coordinator to community, whatever your role is. That is in fact your role, maybe technically at Compass Family Services, but for me, you are an ally. You are someone who is embodying a type of solidarity. You have chosen this line of work when, again, you could have been doing anything else. And, you know, oftentimes this work that we do comes with very little gratitude. Sometimes you're like, do people even see what I'm trying to do over here? Do people even see the work, the diligence that I go through trying to make sure that I'm giving everything that I can, everything that is available to those members in our community that need it most? And I say to you that there are people who see you, but oftentimes the people that we are helping every day are hurt people, and hurt people who have been hurt consistently by a system just have a harder time showing gratitude because of the ways in which and the conditions that they are experiencing on a daily basis. So I know sometimes we may feel that people think that this is our job and this is what we're supposed to do. But I know that when someone gets a referral for housing, or when someone's getting food stamps, or when someone's able to get free childcare so that they can have a job, I promise you that while they're engaging in the services that you have been able to provide them, that they are in full gratitude because they're living fully into it. And so I hope that at least, you know, your colleagues around the country and those who know what you do every day are in full gratitude to all of you. Something I wanted to share that I shared with Rhett is that for 25 years, I was part of a campaign to add a new category to the United States Census, because I think representation is also important. When I look at the beautiful screens, my screen has 5 screens. So I click through all of them. I see all kinds of people of all different backgrounds. I see intergenerational. I see some younger folks, some seasoned. I call the older ones seasoned because you are still young at heart, but you are seasoned in this world. I see people of different racial and ethnic backgrounds. I see folks, you know, again, of everything. And I love it so much. It's so beautiful to see the diversity that you all have at Compass Family Services. One of the things about growing up as an Arab American in the United States of America, I never had a checkbox. So when I go to check off a job application, or I'm checking off, you know, a college application, or even filling out the United States Census, and I'm sure that you all have demographic information based on federal and state and city grants that you get. This country decided that I'm white. So basically, under the white category, they actually explained it in the United States Census, and they say that they give you examples for it. So obviously, anyone who's Eastern European, and then they give you examples like Egypt is an example, apparently, of a nation. If your nationality is Egyptian, apparently you're white. Anyone from the Levant, so Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, we would be considered white. And so for 25 years, there's been a campaign to add a category called MENA, Middle East, North Africa. Now, we could debate, and there has been debates within the larger Arab American community about whether MENA is the right category, because people will argue when you say Middle East, but it's Middle East to what? But the reason why they chose Middle East, North Africa is because it had already become pretty standard to say Middle East. And obviously, North Africa is very specific to that region of North Africa, like Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Egypt. And so for 25 years, we worked on this category. And in 2015, President Barack Obama at the time, he actually tested the category, and it tested very well. And we were gearing up for 2020, and we were about to be in the 2020 census. And then our friend Donald Trump came along, and he said, absolutely not on my watch. It was probably not Donald Trump specifically, but the administration at that time basically took out the recommendation to add MENA to the United States Census. And the reason for that is that if more people were to identify with a new category, which would be Middle East, North Africa, that would significantly decrease the white population in the United States of America. And as you know, some white people want to maintain what they believe to be a majority white nation for reasons that I don't understand why. But in fact, unfortunately, the United States Census, because of the way that the census is set up, had people like me in the white box. Now, remember, the census is a self-identifying project. So if you are Egyptian and you want to say you're African, you might as well, you know, you can go ahead and put African. For me, I'm not going to lie to you, I used to put Asian, and people would be like, are you crazy? Like, you're not Asian. And my justification was that Palestine is on West Asia, is like technically in West Asia. And so I had to do a mental pretzel to figure out where I wanted to fit myself in the United States Census, because I did not want to check the white box. And then once you get to other, and then you have to write it in, and it's just a lot of things going on. In fact, I wanted to tell you about a funny campaign I worked on between 2010 and 2015. I worked on a campaign actually in 2010, when we were doing that census, to just send an example to this administration at the time, which I believe is the reason why we ended up getting it tested in 2015. I started a campaign with some colleagues, actually from Southern California, called Check It Right, You Ain't White. And the campaign, that was the name of the campaign. It was very clever at the time. And we gave people instructions, and we told them, click other, right, you know, check off other, and then in the other, they ask you to be more specific. And we told people, write in Yemeni American, Palestinian, Egyptian, Arab American, whatever it is that identified you, write that in. And what happens is when you do the other write-in, it makes the US Census would have to do basically a lot more work. And I think it was enough work that they ended up being like, everybody chill, we're going to test it and see if what you're saying is right. And then they did test it, like I said, in 2015, and then 2020 came along, and as you know, as I said, it did not make it in. But there are most recently under the Biden administration, they re-upped the testing for MENA, and in fact, they have added it to the Office of Management and Budget. So at some point over the course of the next few months, it's going to trickle down to organizations that do get federal funding. So you're going to find a new box that is going to help even diversify the people that you are serving by giving them the opportunity to identify as MENA. And I think what I say to people all the time is that, and I was listening to a commencement speech by a professor named Ruha Benjamin, who I highly recommend be a speaker during Black History Month or Women's History Month. She's an incredibly powerful speaker. And I want to just make a really quick point about representation. Representation in of itself is not enough, because sometimes we have people who look like you and me, maybe share some of the identities that you and I have, but are not aligned with our values and principles. So I want to make that clear. But I do think it is important for students and small business owners and others to be able, even clients, to be able to see themselves in a category where they feel an affinity to a group, and are not forced to be, for example, part of a group that they don't feel any alignment to, or at least are not experiencing the same privileges of that group. So I'm really excited about this news. And it's pushing California in particular to take it to another level. California wants to officialize MENA even more so than what's trickling down from the federal government. So just in case you all heard it here first, you will all see that soon. And I'm really happy, and always tell people, it took us 25 years. Sometimes we want things to change in our organizations, in our communities, and we're, ready to go, and we want change tomorrow or next week. Just letting you know, I've been around for 25 years watching this campaign, and to see it come into fruition all these years later is still empowering, still inspiring, although it took that much time. And I'll just end by saying this, and I told this to Rhett. We live in this very difficult world. I mean, everywhere I look, there is horror that is happening, whether you're looking at the US-Mexico border, whether you're looking abroad across the world, especially from the place that I'm from in Palestine. You're looking at the continued police murders like we just saw in Chicago of a man who was shot 96 times in 41 seconds. The continued rise in houselessness all across the country, the lack of health care. I could sit here for days and tell you about the horror that is everywhere we look. But one thing that I will say, just so that I leave you with this, is that sometimes when we look at our colleagues, if you have colleagues, for example, from the Congo or from Sudan or from Palestine, just know that there are people who are showing up to work every day, but are also brokenhearted. People who are experiencing great loss, and people who are experiencing great trauma, depending on where they are from or what their experience, even on a personal level in their families. So one of the things I ask people all the time for is give each other grace. Check in with one another. Sometimes, when we work at an organization that has 150 employees, we're not expecting to know everybody. But if you have people who work in your department, who work in your kind of vicinity, in your program, every once in a while, just check in and say, hey, you cool? You good? Everything's all right? If you need anything, let me know. I think it means a lot to your colleagues sometimes to check in, because there's so much happening around us and in this world, and people are still trying to be normal. And it is not normal to be normal in a world that is not normal. And I think oftentimes we work so hard to try to show up and just be regular people, but it's really hard. Like, I work overtime to show up and be normal. Like, even me here with all of you, while I'm so honored and grateful, it takes a lot for me to just be Linda Sarsour in the presentation mode. And I think oftentimes we don't know what our colleagues are going through. And so just asking, for you all to replicate a world that we want to all live in, which is be kind to one another, give grace to one another, show up for one another, because oftentimes we're looking for solidarity from I don't know where. But I'm always telling people the solidarity comes from the people who are with you and around you. And oftentimes we spend more time at work than we do at home with our families. So I just wanted to say that I appreciate Rhett for bringing me here today. And I really am grateful for all the work that you do. Like I said, there are different definitions for superheroes, and people talk about superheroes and people will tell you who their heroes are. My heroes are the people that have chosen to commit their lives to the most marginalized people. You are the heroes. And these people count on you every single day. And there's probably families that are walking around the greater San Francisco area who may now have housing, may now have started, at a, community college, maybe got some daycare because you helped them get there. and you put them on the track, not just to survive in this country, but to thrive. And that's the kind of world that I want to live in. And I'm grateful to live in a world with all of you. So thank you, Rhett, for having me here today.
Absolutely. Linda, thank you so much for sharing about your story, your background, your advocacy, your activism, and all that you do. And it was a very powerful message, and we are just so honored to have you as our keynote for Arab American Heritage Month. Before I open it up on the floor, and I see that there are people that are putting things in the chat, and I had a chance to work with our task force, and I wanted to ask a couple of questions to get a little more insight on your book and your authorship. And before I open it up to our group, because I know this was something that was important to you, that we could have time for people to ask you questions, was sort of the intersection of identities. And you talked a little bit about this. And then when I think about your authorship, your activism, the book, I know you have 2 books. I don't want to just mention We Are Not Here to Be Bystanders, which I think came out in 2020. I think you had another book come out in 2022. So I want to make sure that I'm plugging your work. It often intersects various different facets of identity, whether it's race, religion, gender, and so on. And then thinking about how you address these intersections in your book, what message do you hope that readers and folks that have had the opportunity to follow your work, what do you hope to convey about the complexity and the richness of these identities within the Arab American community?
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that, Rhett, and not to get you know, on a dark side, but just to give people a little bit about why I wrote a book. I wrote a book when I was 37 years old, and I said earlier it was a memoir. People are probably thinking to themselves, "You were only 37. Like, what kind of life did you live that you already telling your life story?" People usually write their memoirs when they're like 50 or 60 years old. They've kind of lived a pretty significant life. The reason why I wrote a memoir in 2017 is when I started writing, and then I think I ended. It was about 18 months to 2 years of me writing that book. It was actually for the reason that I was under extreme hardship and attacks by right-wing forces, to the point of having credible death threats that were investigated by the highest levels of law enforcement. And so at some point I decided that if I were to leave this earth in this type of way, I wanted to leave a legacy. I wanted to leave the story, not just my story as one individual, one activist, but one that really was a reflection of the communities that I came from. I wanted to make sure that there was a book that bore witness to the years in post 9/11 America of what Muslims experienced and continue to experience, what Arab Americans experienced and what they continue to experience. My book is not just a book about the bad times. My book is also a story about resilience and joy and solidarity. My book is a book that previews many marginalized communities. I wanted to give them space in my heart and in my story, because for the last many decades, even up on, when I wrote the book in 2017, prior to that, I was one of those people, Rhett, that you can always find my bright colored hijab everywhere. If there is an injustice and a harm, I was outside. I have been on the US-Mexico border. I have been on the streets of Ferguson, on the streets of Minneapolis. I moved to Kentucky during a global pandemic to fight for Breonna Taylor. I was on the streets of Staten Island for Eric Garner and actually marched with a group of people from Staten Island to Washington, D.C. I marched 250 miles. And people said we were out of our minds. And we said, no, you are out of your minds if you think that you're going to kill unarmed people in our community and think we're going to be silent about it. So if you think I'm out of my mind for marching 250 miles to raise awareness about the ways in which policing in America targets and criminalizes Black and brown people, call me crazy, because I'm happy to take that label. But my book really, again, shows those intersections of my identity. Remember, I said this earlier, there's nothing extraordinary about me. I'm a daughter of immigrants. I'm a woman. I'm a mom. I share a lot of identities that other people have. We all come with multiple things to the table. And the message that you leave with in my book is really 3 things. Number 1, be your whole, full, unapologetic self. Don't leave any part of your identity out because somebody told you it makes them feel uncomfortable. I show up in my whole self because not only because I want to and I have the right to, because I know a lot of young people are watching me and a lot of young people are watching you. So when you become small, you're sending a message for somebody else to become small. And I want you to be big because I want young people to feel like they can be their full unapologetic selves. The second message you leave with in my book is that you don't need to be a trained organizer or an activist to care about people. Like, why have we made this into a career? Like this idea that activism is a career. Like if you see injustice, you see harm, it should be our nature as good people who want good for others to say this is wrong. And to say to myself, what do I have? What tools, what skills, what could I do to intervene and step in to alleviate harm and suffering? So that's kind of the second thing. And then the third thing that you get out of my book is we're all we got, my friends. This idea that we're looking for people to save our people, it's not happening. We are safety. We are what's going to save our people. And so I hope that what people get, and if you do get access to my book, it is in public library, so you can feel free to take it out of a library, is that we all find a role to play. Everybody got a role to play, and we all have time to give to people who are counting on us.
Absolutely incredible. And I'm gonna make sure that I put that in the chat, and there's lots of kudos happening for you in the chat. Before I open it up, one other thing that I really wanted to talk about, and something that I don't get to hear you speak as much about, but I know is detailed in who you are, is just the impact of motherhood and what that means to you, having 3 children, having, being a mother of 2 by the age of 20, the way it impacts your perception of the world, the work that you do, and the time that you have to spend away from your family as you are fighting the good fight. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I mean, motherhood and parenthood is not easy. So I want to also give an extra salute for people who are parents here, are caretakers of others. For me, Rhett, I was a young mom. I was 20 years old. I already had 2 kids. When I was 24, I had my 3rd kid. And then I was like, yeah, that's enough. I contributed a lot of good humans to this world. But it was hard because as an activist on the front lines, I left my children with my parents often. They were really raised by a village. And I am very grateful and privileged to have grown up in a type of community in Southwest Brooklyn where my children could be raised by a village. But I'm going to tell you a really quick story. I started by telling you that my dreams and aspirations were to be a high school English teacher. And just to show you the remarkableness of little humans who watch every move that you make. My son is a sports fanatic. He literally was crying yesterday. He's 24 years old, crying yesterday after the Knicks winning 2-0. I mean, it was the most remarkable win that I'd ever seen. And I've been a Knicks fan since the 1990s. And he's a sports fan. And ever since he was 8 years old, he would be able to name, he would rattle off stats and, plays from playoffs for years before he was even born. He would look stuff up on YouTube, but it was just incredible. And his dream was to be a physical therapist in an NBA locker room. That's his whole dream. And when he started his college experience, he majored in sports medicine. And then in his 2nd year of college, he came to me in full-fledged tears. And he said to me, "Mom, I changed my major." And I said, and he was like, "Look," he said, "I know that my dream was to be a physical therapist in an NBA locker room," but he said that was selfish of me to have that as a dream. And that's what he said. And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Mom," he said, "all that you have done," he said, "I changed my major to English and political science." So my son has a degree in political science and English literature. And my son on May 20th of this year is going to graduate with his master's degree in special education. And my son has fulfilled my dreams deferred. So my dream was to be a high school English teacher and particularly teach special ed kids because those are the kids that I wanted to love. And my son is a proud member of the United Federation of Teachers, a proud union member, and he has joined the ranks of some of America's heroes, the New York City public school system teachers. And that's the power of being a parent that walks in purpose. Your children see you, they see what you do, they understand why you chose to do the things that you did. And so I'm grateful to have children that did not resent me for being away from home and somehow found an understanding that while I may not have been there for their many milestones, but that they knew what I was doing was the right thing and that someday it was going to impact them in their lives. And not only that, now my children have joined me in public service. My second child is in her first year of master's degree in special education as well. So she too will be, she's actually going to middle school. My son is in the high school. My daughter's in middle school teaching right now. And then my youngest is a nurse. And to see my children grow up believing that they too wanted to live a life of purpose and going into a sector of work that is of service to people and to other humans makes everything that I have done, every obstacle, every challenge, every sacrifice worth it. And that is the power of being a parent and one that walks in purpose.
Absolutely incredible. I am a parent. Your story is very touching, and kudos to your son, kudos to your children, and kudos to you for all of the work that you've done and the impact that you've made. And you'll see lots of love and appreciation in our chat. And I want to open it up to our team, but I have to ask, you just talked about the playoffs, you're a sports fan. You talk about being a pure New Yorker. What does that mean for you? And then what's your favorite type of pizza? I mean, I got to hear, what does that pure New Yorker mean to you? What does it mean being in the city? Because there's so much regional pride, especially in New York, especially Brooklyn. But what does that mean to you?
Let me just make it clear. If somebody tells you they're from like Rochester or Long Island, that's really not New York. That's like we have a little debate about that. And being from Brooklyn specifically has its own kind of connotation, I guess you could say. You know, Rhett, for me, being from New York is, and it's funny because when I go around the country and people see me outside and I tell them I'm from Brooklyn, they always look at me and say, oh, that all makes sense to me now. I mean, New Yorkers are people with grit. We are unfiltered people. We'll say what is on our mind. We are a very focused people. If you've ever come to New York City, you could just watch the way people walk. We're always on a mission, Mike. I'm always on a mission. Every day is a mission, and a mission has to be accomplished. You know, New Yorkers are, you know, we fly, like, you know, we got a little swag, and we just got this. Even when I'm, you know, and I travel the country, I swear to God, I'll walk into a gas station and somebody will be like, yo, are you from Brooklyn? And it just makes me so proud that I'm making my people proud, taking my accent from town to city across America. So New York people are we're a lot. I'm not gonna lie to you, my friends, we are a lot. But we are, again, a people on a mission. And I'm so proud to be a New Yorker and to be an ambassador to Brooklyn, which by the way, was a city up until 1898. So if Brooklyn were a city, we would be the 4th largest city in the United States of America. But I'll work on that campaign some other time. But for now.
Okay. Absolutely love that.
And the only pizza, my friend, is the plain slice. Once you start getting all fancy and doing the whole artichoke situation and people start being all gluten-free and all this other stuff, it's the plain $2.50 slice, my friend. That's the plain slice. The flat slice. No deep dish and no, I don't know, things. I don't know. People be doing too much with the pizza. Just keep it simple, my friends.
Keep it simple. I love that. Flat. I see a lot of people down here. Somebody saying Joe's Pizza. Our CEO is actually from New York, so I absolutely love that. And I'm guessing Yankees, Mets. Where you falling?
See, this is where it gets complicated, Rhett, because technically I'm from Brooklyn. I should be a Mets fan, but I'm a Yankees fan and I'm a New York Knicks fan. And so people would tell me I should be supporting the Brooklyn Nets, but you know, it hasn't. You know, I'm a New York Knicks fan. I'm a Giants fan. So.
It's the New York in you. I love that. Love that. Love that. What I want to do is I'm going to take the spotlight, because if there is someone that has a question, I know we have a few minutes remaining because you are so busy, and I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to chat with us today. If someone has a question, and it looks like they do, please do me a favor and put it in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as we can. Let's see, we have a question from one of our team members. Linda says, Linda, do you know Bruce Wallace, the founder of 121contact.org? I wonder if you two know each other, given you're involved in similar work in NYC.
The name sounds a little familiar, but you know what? I'm going to go find me Bruce Wallace, and I'm going to make sure that I know him. Make sure I know him, because if we're in the same work, we should definitely know each other. So I'm definitely going to look up Bruce Wallace, and I'm going to tell him, our friend Ashley at Compass Family Services asked if I knew you, and make my own introduction.
Love that. Love that. With the few minutes that we have remaining, does anyone else want to ask a question? You can either put it in the chat, you can come off mute. And look, again, it's just so important that while we have a little bit of time, it looks like this. Oh, there's just kudos from Cesar in the chat. Thank you so much for all of your work and all that you do. It's looking like, there we go. I'm seeing that. Thank you all so much. A lot of aha moments, a lot of respect, a lot of just thank you, Linda.
Yes.
We're so
India
honored.
just brought me all the way back. She just took you back to about 2006. That was a long time ago when I was on the Tyra Banks show.
Oh, there you go. See, we have some people that have been rocking with you for a very long
India
time.
been around for a while.
I love that, love that, love that. A lot of people are just giving kudos and saying how inspired they are. You know, last thing, and I've heard you, for people that don't know, the name John Jay and the history behind it, but thinking about your high school, because I know that was a pivotal point for you. Before you leave us, can you talk about that John Jay high school experience and how that shaped who you are, being immersed in that culture and what that name means?
John Jay High School was at the time, and in New York City, the nickname for John Jay was Jungle Jay, because at the time that I grew up, and I'm telling you, I'm old, folks. I got some good genes though. My mom really hooked it up. My mom's side of the family got some really good genes. I grew up in the 90s at a time where gang activity in New York City was at an all-time high. And as many people know from some of the high schools, I mean, they still exist today, but in the 90s, it was a thing. Different gangs had different prominence and influence at different schools. John Jay was the School of Law and Justice. It was a school that was named after, I believe, a judge, and their idea of the school was to get young people into law enforcement and get people into like criminal justice, etc. And it was such an ironic name and an ironic theme for a school that had bars on all the windows, a school that had metal detectors that were very airport style. Not only did you walk through a metal detector, not only did you put your book bag through an airport type machine, and then you stood up against the wall, and obviously you could probably imagine that I did not get stopped and frisked in the same way that the Black boys did, for example, in my school. And there was always something in my heart that told me something's not right here. I would remember them checking the hair and braids of Black girls. I would watch them ask young boys to open their mouths to check for blades. And I was wondering why they do that with some and not others. And so, you know, as a young person, you are very observant to that experience. And I remember a lot of times seeing young people who are not applying to college, people who are not even having that conversation, and only some kids being invited to college office and college kind of meetings, and others are not. And then, you know me, I'm just like, what's going on? And just to be clear, I went to a school with about 4,000 students, and probably in my whole school, there were probably 10 Arab American kids. So I want you to imagine that we were the minority of the minority of the minority in the school. And so I had an affinity to the Black students. And a lot of people also, you know, when they see me, because most of my work is in the racial justice space around police accountability. And people always are like, I don't know if that makes sense. And I'll tell you really quickly how I got there. My father owned a bodega, very stereotypical Palestinian guy who owned a bodega in a neighborhood in New York City called Crown Heights. And so I grew up in Sunset Park, which is a predominantly Central American / Puerto Rican neighborhood. And then my mom would, a couple of days a week, would have to go help my father at the store. So we would obviously go with her. And that neighborhood, Crown Heights, at the time in the 90s was predominantly Black and Caribbean. And so I had two sets of friends. I had Central American, Puerto Rican friends, Dominican friends. That was one group. That was my neighborhood I live in. And then there was another set of friends that I had who were Black and Caribbean from Crown Heights. And so I grew up so privileged to be immersed in these diverse relationships and friendships. And of course, going to an all Black high school. I mean, my high school was about maybe 80% Black. I would say maybe 15% Latino. And then everybody else was, you know, 2 Asian kids here, a couple of Arab kids here. You know how it is, maybe 3, 4 white kids in my school. But overall, my school was predominantly Black. And that experience really shifted the way in which I look at the world. And just so you know, how when you're young and you grow up, I started, part of my work is also working on the school to prison pipeline and having a front row seat to that. I watched the arrests at my school. I watched the criminalization of young people at my school. And so again, I always say to people, never underestimate the things that you witness and the ways in which those experiences cause you to make the kinds of decisions. And I know for many of you, you experience the things that you are now helping other people alleviate or, address. And I think that is the most inspiring kind of work, when you can do it from a place of experience. So I'm still here, and all the problems that I've been fighting are still there, unfortunately. But you know what? We can't give up, because people before us didn't, and we're not about to right now.
I absolutely appreciate you, Linda. Thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing day on purpose. I will email you. We'll have to have you back. Thank you for all that you do. Compass and our guests, thank you all for being here. And I hope that everybody has a fantastic day on purpose. Have a good one, everybody. See you later.